My name is Claudette Jones, and for years my life was a locked ledger, its pages sealed to the only person whose eyes I once lived for, my son. Damien. He knew me the way a crowd knows a rumor, secondhand. Sour. And easy to swallow. They called me, the wretched woman. I wore that name like iron on my ankles and learned to walk anyway. What he never saw was the life I rebuilt in the dark, documents neat in their folders. Deeds sleeping under my signature. A quiet empire that never needed applause. The call came on a weekday, so still it felt staged. I was in my study. City glass pouring blue light across my desk. When an unknown number bloomed on the screen. I answered, not with hope, just with habit. Claudette, he said, careful not to say mother. Even grown. I knew his voice. Time had deepened it, not softened it. It's Damien. The room went weightless. 20 years of missed birthdays and unanswered holidays folded into a single breath. I'm getting married, he said, clean as a knife. Of course you'll want to be there. The invitation wasn't a hand extended. It was a stage trap sprung. The sneer arrived right on cue. Now everyone will see what I told them. The wretched woman. Sit there in your rags and let them learn. I let his words settle, dust on polished wood. Once, they would have sent me to ground. Mouth full of cotton and shame. But that woman is gone. What answered him wasn't a sob. It was a sound I hardly recognized as mine, low, steady, and edged in steel. I'll be there, I said. I hung up and looked at my reflection in the window, pearls quiet at my throat. Back unbent. He thought he'd handed me a noose. He'd handed me lighting. For years I rose in silence. The way a building goes up behind canvas. Tonight, the canvas would drop. He wanted a spectacle of my ruin. Instead, he scheduled my entrance. I was not always the woman who commands boardrooms and walks out of a Rolls-Royce without flinching. Before the whispers turned into shouts. Before the name, wretched woman, branded itself across my skin. I was just Claudette, a girl from the wrong side of the tracks who thought marriage would be her ladder out. When I married Howard Jones, I believed I was stepping into a family. Into stability. Into something that would make me forget the hunger and the second-hand clothes of my youth. Howard's parents owned a trucking company, not a dynasty, but solid enough to strut. On our wedding day, his mother leaned toward her sister and whispered loud enough for me to hear, "She doesn't belong in this family." I laughed it off then. Love, I told myself, would silence them. I didn't know love can't shout over the voices of people determined to despise you. When my son Damien was born, I poured myself into motherhood like it was a second soul. I rocked him through fevers. Patched his jeans when they tore on the playground. Stretched every dollar when Howard's hours were cut. I was not perfect, but I was present. And still, to Howard's family, I was nothing but the outsider dragging him down. They saw me not as a mother. Not as a wife. But as a blemish they were desperate to rub out. The breaking point came when Howard's small business collapsed. He had taken loans under shady terms. Cut corners on paperwork. And when the auditors came, his family moved like snakes in the grass. They needed a scapegoat. And I, naive, voiceless, inconvenient, was the easiest target. They forged my name on papers I never touched. They whispered to neighbors that I'd siphoned money. They wove a story where I wasn't a wife holding the family afloat but a woman scheming in shadows. Howard stood silent. My husband, the man who once swore he'd protect me, let his silence sharpen their knives. And when the day came, they led me away in handcuffs. I still see it every night, Damien in the doorway. No more than 6 years old. His small hands clinging to the frame as he screamed my name. His grandmother pulled him back as though my voice itself was poison. My throat tore from calling out. But he never reached me. That image has lived behind my eyelids ever since, the boy I loved being taught to recoil. In the courtroom, truth was irrelevant. Connections, wealth, lies, they spoke louder. The verdict was never in doubt. I was sentenced, stripped of my dignity, and turned into a ghost in my own son's life. The words, wretched woman, followed me into prison. Into whispers. into every silence that swallowed my name. What hurt most wasn't the cell bars. It was the silence from outside. Birthdays came and went without a card. Mother's Days arrived with no crayon drawing. No crooked letters. No phone call. I wrote until my fingers cramped. Letters soaked with memory. With love. With the only thing I had left to give. Most never left the mailroom. The few that did likely burned in someone else's hands before they reached him. Howard's family told Damien that I had chosen disgrace over him. That I loved schemes more than I loved my child. And the worst part was, he believed them. Inside prison walls, I carried that betrayal like a brand. I was no longer Claudette the wife. Claudette the mother. I was the wretched woman they wanted erased. But even as they buried me, somewhere deep in my chest, a vow lived. This will not be my ending. Prison ends with the clang of gates. But the harder sentence begins the moment you step outside. When I walked free, the sky stretched wide and the air was sharp. But freedom without a home, without a dollar, without a family is just another kind of cage. I carried nothing but a plastic bag of state-issued clothes and $40 in cash. The price tag on my fresh start. No one was waiting. Not Howard, not Damien, not even a distant cousin with pity in her eyes. I stepped onto the gravel alone. The crunch under my shoes louder than any welcome I would never receive. The bus ticket they handed me took me to a halfway house, thin walls, stricter rules, and a bed I shared with cockroaches for company. Every morning, I walked out with a list of addresses in my pocket. Chasing work. The question came every time. Have you ever been convicted of a felony? I'd check the box, watch the smile vanish, and feel the weight of silence that followed. So I took what I could. I scrubbed motel toilets no guest dared to look back at. I flipped greasy burgers until my spine burned. I pushed mops down endless office hallways after midnight, humming to myself just to fight the emptiness. It wasn't dignified, but it was survival. And still, the whispers followed. At grocery stores, cashiers muttered, "That's her." At bus stops, neighbors turned their faces, pretending not to see. To them, I wasn't Claudette. I was still the wretched woman. The convict. The mother who abandoned her son. Shame shadowed me, but I refused to let it choke me. So I built a discipline out of scraps. I cut every cost. No coffee. No bus fare when I could walk. The same 3 shirts on rotation until the seams frayed. Every spare coin I saved went into a jar that rattled with the sound of resistance. At night, when other women at the halfway house drowned themselves in cheap liquor or in the arms of men who wouldn't remember their names, I sat under the pale light of a library lamp. I studied finance, real estate, entrepreneurship. I copied definitions I barely understood into notebooks. Memorized terms until they became prayers. Knowledge, I told myself, was the one currency nobody could steal. Some nights I thought the loneliness would split me in two. The silence pressed so heavy it felt like it might crush my chest. I wanted to give up, to collapse back into the role they wrote for me. But every time, I remembered, they left me for dead. If I quit now, they win. And so I pushed. Each floor I scrubbed, each book I read, each dollar I dropped into that jar. It was a brick in a foundation no one else could see. To outsiders, I was invisible. To myself, I was becoming something more dangerous than they imagined. Survival was no longer enough. Survival was just the beginning. It happened on a night that looked like all the others. I was mopping the marble floors of a downtown office building. The kind where executives laughed about vacations in Paris while I worked unseen in their shadows. 2 young assistants lingered in the break room, voices carrying across the empty hall. They weren't bragging about bonuses or promotions. They were talking about something called Airbnb. I made half my rent in a weekend, one said, her laughter echoing against the glass. I froze mid-swipe, half a month's rent, in 2 nights. For me, that was more than a week's wages. That night, curiosity became hunger. Back at the library, I typed the word into the computer with shaking hands. The concept was simple. List a room, host travelers, and get paid. It felt impossible. Who would stay in my drafty one-room apartment with second-hand furniture and creaking pipes? But desperation is a cousin of courage. I borrowed a friend's old camera, scrubbed my place until it shone, rearranged the furniture to look less tired, and uploaded photos that made it almost charming. I priced it low, just enough to cover a few bills, expecting nothing. Within days, a booking arrived, a young couple passing through town. I made the bed with trembling fingers, lit a cheap candle, and welcomed them with the politeness of a hotelier who had never worn the title. When they left, they handed me money and left behind something even more precious, a glowing review. That single weekend cracked open a door I didn't know existed. Suddenly, I wasn't just a woman surviving from paycheck to paycheck. My apartment wasn't just shelter, it was an asset. I leaned into it. I scavenged thrift stores for cheap decor, painted walls with discounted cans, added small touches, fresh flowers, clean linens, that cost little but looked like luxury. The bookings came steadily, each one a rung on a ladder out of the shadows. I saved every penny, refusing to spend on anything but the essentials. When my lease ended, I didn't renew. Instead, I signed for a 2-bedroom apartment. I lived in the smaller room and rented the larger one full-time. Neighbors called me reckless. I called it strategy. By the end of that year, the trickle had become a current. My jar of coins had grown into an account with commas. I was still scrubbing floors by day, still bone-tired, still invisible to the world that had branded me wretched. But in the silence of my nights, something new was taking shape, a machine, fueled by grit and sharpened by hunger. For the first time since prison, I felt power return to my hands. Not the power of wealth alone, but the power of knowing I had found my lever. What began as survival was turning into momentum. And momentum, once it starts, is almost impossible to stop. The trick with power is not to flaunt it too early. By the time most people saw me, I was still the woman with plain clothes and calloused hands. What they didn't see was the empire rising, brick by quiet brick, behind the curtain. Every dollar I earned from hosting, I reinvested. One property became two became four. I learned how to spot the houses others overlooked, the ones with boarded windows and peeling paint. The ones neighbors wrote off as lost. To me, they were blank canvases. I negotiated deals at kitchen tables with families desperate to sell, signed papers under LLCs, and spread ownership so thin across names and partnerships that if anyone searched for Claudette Jones, they would find nothing but silence. Silence became my shield, in a world where a black woman with a record was expected to fail. Invisibility was protection. Banks turned me away. Investors laughed. Competitors dismissed me. Good. Their doubt was my cover. I worked with a handful of contractors who knew me by reputation. Not headlines. I was the woman who paid on time, never haggled unfairly, and kept her word. They didn't need to know the rest. They didn't need to know that while I looked modest, my accounts grew thicker each quarter. Still, I lived like shadows. No magazine features, no interviews, no social clubs to whisper about me. While others posted their vacations and new cars, I kept my pearls in a drawer and my triumphs off the record. Even my closest circle, just Aunt Louisa and one trusted partner, only knew pieces of the whole. Because this wasn't about parading wealth. This was about timing. I wasn't chasing applause. I was waiting for the day when silence itself would turn into thunder. By my mid-50s, my reach stretched beyond my own city. Chicago, Houston, Charlotte, each deed tucked neatly into files only I touched. On the outside, I was still that woman whispered about in grocery lines. On the inside, I was sharper than ever, holding cards no one even knew existed. And still, Damien never saw me. He lived in the glow of another family's story, certain his mother had vanished in disgrace. That was fine. I wasn't ready for him to know. Not yet, because what he mistook for absence was preparation. Silence had been my burden once. Now, it was my strategy. The phone call from Damien wasn't an olive branch. It was bait. He thought inviting me to his wedding would be the final humiliation, a parade of shame before the only audience that mattered to him, his bride. Her family, and the society he so desperately wanted to impress. He imagined me stumbling in rags, whispered about behind champagne flutes. What he didn't understand was this: he hadn't given me a trap. He had built me a stage. I began to prepare not with trembling hands but with the precision of a general. Every detail mattered. The first call I made was to my head of security, a man whose silence carried more weight than speeches. "I need 2 of your best," I told him, polished, discreet, unshakable. He didn't ask why. He knew me well enough to understand strategy when he heard it. Next came the car, not just transportation, but symbolism. I ordered a silver Rolls-Royce Ghost, sleek, quiet, commanding. Damien had called me a ghost of disgrace. I would arrive as a ghost of reckoning. Then the outfit. I visited a private tailor who measured not just my body but my posture. I chose a navy suit. Lines sharp enough to cut. Heels that clicked steady as a clock. A pearl necklace understated yet undeniable. Armor, not costume. Every detail whispered the truth. I am not the woman you buried. Back at home, I opened the drawer where I kept a single faded photograph, Damien as a boy. Hand wrapped in mine, smile wide and unguarded. For a moment, grief pressed against my ribs. But then I closed the box and locked it away. This day was not about longing. It was about clarity. I didn't need to scream. Didn't need to fight. All I needed was to walk into that wedding and let silence, and presence, do the work. Because Damien thought he had arranged my humiliation. What he had really done was announce my entrance. And this time, the whole room would see exactly who the wretched woman had become. The wedding day dawned unnervingly still, as if even the air was holding its breath. By noon, the venue's long driveway was lined with silk dresses and polished shoes. Guests sipping champagne under white canopies. Laughter floated across the lawn, the kind of brittle laughter people use to cover cracks. Then the sound came, the low, steady hum of an engine. Heads turned before the silver Rolls-Royce Ghost even came into view. Sunlight caught the chrome grille and flared like a spotlight. Whispers rippled like wind through tall grass. Who is that? A dignitary? A CEO? The car glided to a halt at the entrance. My driver stepped out, opened the door, and the first of my 2 bodyguards emerged. Broad-shouldered, suit sharp as stone. The second followed, scanning the crowd with quiet authority. Conversations broke off mid-sentence. Glasses froze halfway to lips. And then, slowly, I stepped out. The heels struck marble, 1, 2, each step crisp as a metronome. My navy suit caught the light. Its cut immaculate. My pearl necklace gleaming like a quiet declaration of survival. I didn't rush. I didn't smile. I simply walked with a steadiness that made silence fall heavier than any orchestra could play. The bride's family smiled politely at first, mistaking me for someone of rank. On the other side, faces faltered, gasps burst like glass shattering when recognition dawned. Howard's lips parted in disbelief, color draining from his cheeks. But Damien, my son, was the one who trembled. His smirk evaporated, his hand tightening on a chair until his knuckles went white. He hadn't expected this. He had expected rags, shame, lowered eyes. Instead, he saw the ghost he thought long buried, walking upright, draped in quiet power, every step echoing the truth he had tried to erase. I didn't flinch. I didn't break eye contact. I walked through that threshold as if it had been built for me. Music faltered, laughter died, and all that remained was the steady rhythm of my heels on stone. The wretched woman had arrived. Not in disgrace. Not in silence. But in triumph. The reception buzzed like a hive of nervous whispers. Forks paused mid-air, champagne coupes hovered at lips. Eyes darted between me and Damien as though trying to stitch together a story they hadn't been told. It didn't take long for someone to hand me my cue. One of Howard's sisters, always drunk on wine and arrogance, clinked her glass. "We're so proud of Damien," she purred, smiling wide, proud that he found it in his heart to invite his mother. "It takes a special man to forgive the past." The words dripped condescension, meant to seat me back into chains. Some guests nodded, unsure. Others glanced at me, waiting to see if I would shrink. I did not shrink. I rose, deliberately, smoothing the napkin onto the table, and lifted my glass. My voice carried without force, clear and steady, commanding silence until even the servers froze with trays in their hands. "A toast," I said, letting the pause stretch until the air itself trembled. "To my son Damien, and his beautiful bride Vanessa. May your union be blessed." Polite smiles wavered, guests leaned in, then, before the first sip touched a lip, I cut through the room like a blade. "But before you drink, let me tell you something true." Gasps rustled like wind through silk. Damien shifted violently in his chair, jaw tight, a vein pulsing at his temple. Howard stared at his plate. "I have been called the wretched woman," I began. "I have been painted as a mother who abandoned her child, who chose disgrace over love. For years, I carried that name in silence." I let the words hang, then struck. "But let me be clear tonight, I did not abandon my son. I was taken from him." Mouths opened in shock. Vanessa's eyes widened, darting between me and Damien. The bride's parents exchanged uneasy looks. I was led away in handcuffs while my boy cried for me in the doorway. And those who should have spoken truth, stood silent. Lies buried my name, but they did not bury my spirit. I walked through prison. I scrubbed floors. I studied under library lights. I rebuilt, brick by brick, not in shame, but in dignity, not in failure, but in triumph. The silence was deafening. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim. I fixed my gaze on Damien, locking his eyes so he could not look away. My son was told a story, that I was nothing, unworthy, erased. But tonight I stand not for forgiveness, not for approval, but for truth, and truth, no matter how long buried, always rises. I raised the glass one final time. To Damien and Vanessa, may your marriage be built on truth, not lies, because lies, no matter how polished, always crack beneath the weight of time. I drank slowly, deliberately, and when I lowered my glass, the hall was silent, no applause, no forced cheer, only revelation, settling heavy on every chest, until all that remained was the pounding of Damien's heart, loud enough for everyone to hear. For one aching heartbeat after my toast, the room stayed frozen, forks lay abandoned on plates, champagne sweated in untouched glasses, and Damien, my son, the man who had planned this entire spectacle, sat rigid, his hand trembling against the linen. Then he exploded. He shot up so fast his chair toppled behind him. His voice cracked like glass under strain. "You think this is your stage?" he roared, his finger stabbing the air toward me. "You think you can just walk in here and ruin my day? You've ruined everything." Gasps surged across the hall. Guests recoiled in their seats, shrinking from the storm of his fury. Vanessa's family exchanged uneasy glances. The bride herself froze, the glow of her wedding gown dimmed by the man unraveling beside her. I did not move. I did not flinch. I sat still, pearl necklace steady on my chest, glass in hand, watching. His rage did not expose me. It exposed him. "You abandoned me." Damien's voice cracked again, raw and jagged. "You left me, and now you dare to come here, acting like you're better than us? You'll never be more than what you've always been. Never." The words tumbled from his mouth like stones, heavy and desperate, each one bruising only himself. Howard rose, trying to grip his son's arm, but Damien shook him off violently. "Don't touch me. This is her fault, hers. She came here to humiliate me." The guests leaned back, faces pale. Some whispered, some shook their heads. A few looked at me with new eyes, eyes that carried something close to respect. I let the storm rage. My body was still, my expression calm. I was stone, he was fire. And in that contrast, the crowd saw the truth. His fury was wild, uncontrolled, embarrassing. My composure was sharp, unyielding, undeniable. When his shouting peaked, I lifted my glass once more and spoke so softly it sliced through his noise like a scalpel. Sit down, Damien, you're only proving what I already knew. The words hit harder than any scream could. His chest heaved, eyes darting across the crowd. Faces that had once adored him now filled with pity. With judgment, with doubt, the groom who wanted to disgrace me had disgraced himself instead. And in that silence that followed, Damien understood. He had not broken me. He had broken his own image. When the last of Damien's shouts burned into silence, the hall did what he never expected. It exhaled without him. Guests leaned away, murmurs no longer whispers but verdicts. Vanessa's parents refused to meet his eye. Even the bride herself looked at him with dawning fear, as if she'd just married a stranger. I didn't stay for cake or speeches. My role was done, but before I left, I asked for a moment with my son, just the two of us. Away from the chandeliers and the gossiping mouths. We met in a side room off the reception hall. He stood stiff, fists clenched, jaw set, the boy I once cradled now a man chained by bitterness. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg. I simply looked at him the way only a mother can, and said what needed to be said. I don't hate you, Damien, I began. My voice was steady, not cruel, but I don't love you either. Not anymore. That bond, the one that tied us when you were a child, it died the day you chose their lies over the truth. He opened his mouth, anger trembling behind his teeth. But I lifted a hand. No, you've made your choices. I lived with mine. Now you will live with yours. His eyes flickered, rage, shame, something that almost looked like fear. I didn't soften, call me wretched, spit my name, but you cannot erase what I have survived. I carried chains, I carried shame, and still, I rose. Whatever you carry now, Damien, that belongs to you. For a heartbeat, he looked like a boy again, trembling, lost, but pity no longer lived in me. I turned, heels striking the tile with the same calm rhythm they had when I first entered. My bodyguards closed in at my sides, the past dissolving behind me with every step. I did not look back. I did not need to. Outside, the night air was sharp, almost sweet. I climbed into the Rolls-Royce Ghost and let the door close softly behind me. As the car pulled away, the venue shrank in the rearview mirror until it was nothing but light on the horizon. They had called me the wretched woman. They had tried to erase me. But I was still here. Not broken, not begging, not buried. When I look back now, I see chains, cages, tears, and I see fire. Grit, survival. My scars tell a story, not of disgrace, but of endurance. Success was my revenge, dignity was my weapon, and the day of Damien's wedding was the day I proved, not just to him, not just to his father, but to myself, that the wretched woman was wretched no more. And now I want to leave you with this question. If you were in Claudette's place, standing face to face with a son who had believed lies for decades, would you forgive, or would you finally let go? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your story. And if this journey moved you, don't forget to subscribe to Real Drama Family Stories. Every week, we bring you tales of betrayal, resilience, and redemption that remind us, dignity can be the sharpest weapon of all. Your voice matters, your story matters. So tell us, what would you have done?